Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We're going to get going, and if other people, trickle in, we think they'll catch up as well. But we have folks from Israel, from the U.S., from Portugal, from the U.K. this morning. So we have a really cool group of folks. Oh, and Sweden, of course, our panelist today. So we're going to get going. Thank you, everyone, for joining. My name is Lauren Glover. I'm the managing director of Blue Seedling. For those of you who are new to Blue Seedling, I'll introduce us in just a second, but we're really happy to have you all here today. Today's webinar, as you know, is about ultimate demand gen in 2023, specifically looking at how to do an ABM database augmentation. Today, basically, we're going to guide you through a step-by-step playbook on how to scale your demand gen fast, inexpensively, and with some really amazing results, with a focus on efficient growth, sustainable growth, because that's the name of the game for many people. And we're so thrilled to be joined by Adriana Bozbichu, head of demand gen at Stravito, a Stockholm-based scale-up selling to Fortune 2000 companies. Stravito is a client of ours, so today's case study story is going to be about a project that we did together, but we're really going to make sure that it is applicable to all of you and that you can implement similar projects. So let's get straight into it. So who do we have on the call today? We have me, and we have our special guest, as I said, Adriana. She's joining us from Stockholm. We have got Tim, our marketing director at Blue Seedling, who's joining us from San Diego. And here I am again. I'm joining from Brooklyn, New York today. And before we get going any further, let me tell you a little bit about Blue Seedling if you're new to us. We are a B2B marketing agency. We work with fast-growing B2B startups and scale-ups across verticals and across continents. And here are some of our clients that you may be familiar with. There's Stravito in the upper corner. And here are some of our clients' investors. And just a little bit of housekeeping before we get into the content. Yes, we are recording the session today. We will share the recording with you afterwards and a recap. Look out for an email from us right after the session. We'll have a short survey to gather your feedback. And for all of you who joined today, we're offering a free office hours session with our Blue Seedling team to help answer any marketing quandaries you have, talk more about the playbooks, etc. So stay tuned, check your email inbox after the session so you can sign up for your office hours. All right, and so what are we going to do here today? First off, we're going to do a quick warm-up. We want to hear from you about your challenges so we can make sure everything we talk about today is super relevant. Then we're going to go into Stravito's story, how they completed a database augmentation project and an email prospecting initiative. We'll talk about why they did what they did and how they set themselves up for success. And then we're going to share a really step-by-step guide to the playbooks and talk about how you can replicate them. So first up, the warm-up, we want to hear from you. In the chat, please share one rose and one thorn from marketing in 2023 for your company. And so if you're not familiar with that framing, that just means one good thing and one difficult thing from marketing this year so far. And we'll give you 1 minute to reply there. Just imagine I'm playing the Jeopardy music right now. So yeah, let us know one good thing and one tough thing from marketing this year. And then we'll share some of our thoughts from what we're hearing from founders, from marketing teams, at startups and scale-ups. Great, yes. Awesome. Thanks for your replies, everyone. You can see some of them in the chat. Things that people are really loving: webinars, content marketing. Someone says expectations are lower these days because of the market. The market is tough. Yep. Brant, thank you. I love this. Reaching and engaging decision makers. Yep. Unsubscribes for GDPR. Thank you, Mike. Yeah, we're going to cover that as well. Yep. Things are hard to measure. Payoff isn't super obvious. I think there's a theme in here around really figuring out how to measure ROI. Thank you, everyone, for your input. Yes, engagement a challenge. Thank you, Hilton. Videos and podcasts. We'll talk more about a cool B2B podcast later, but yeah, so from my point of view, everything everyone is saying in the chat lines up with this bigger narrative that we've heard from our clients, from just people in our community and startups and scale-ups really across the world right now, is that in the very recent past, the name of the game was growth at any cost. And so for marketing, that meant really throwing a lot of initiatives out there and just sort of seeing what stuck. And that is no longer the case. Really in the past year, and even sooner than that, we've moved to a different climate where the name of the game is efficient growth, sustainable growth. We're being asked to do more with less. And we want to make sure everything we're doing is really, really tailored to our audience. And we're not wasting precious resources on things that aren't going to pay off. So as you can see here, this is just a collection of just a couple headlines I found from the past 6 months of talking about this transition. So for anyone who sees themselves in these headlines, just know that you are not alone. And our topic today is really going to show you how to rise to the occasion in this climate where you are not, trying everything you can. You're staying focused on things that are going to give you a high ROI marketing wise. So let's get into Stravito's story. So what is Stravito? Stravito is a scale-up based in Stockholm, but with a global team that has a wonderful insights management platform. And they sell to big Fortune 2000 companies, enterprise sales. Here's some of their really impressive client lists down here. We have Unilever, Danone, Comcast, Carlsberg, McDonald's. And Stravito, Blue Ceiling has worked with Stravito for a while now, but about 6 months ago, we started a database augmentation project with them. And really, just for those of you who aren't familiar with the terms, that just means taking the marketing database and growing it. And we'll talk more about how we did that. But let's start with what happened. Let's start with the results. The results of this project is that over the course of a few months, Stravito's marketing database grew 3x in a single week. We got 10 demo requests from email. And we had the best week ever for email marketing at Stravito. Email is now contributes to the sales, marketing and sales pipeline like it hadn't before, and really set a foundation for a new buyers community for their buyers and more. So working backwards, that's what happened. And how did they do it? They did it by what we were just talking about, a database augmentation project, ABM just meaning that it is targeting really specific ICPs, which we'll talk more about that soon. And they were able to scale all their demand gen efforts fast, efficient, and with really great results. So why did they undertake this project? Let's start at the beginning. Why did they undertake this? I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can just have a conversation. Adriana, I'm going to pass you the mic. Tell me a little bit. Also, feel free to say hi to the group, but tell me about why Stravito wanted to do a project like this.
Yes, first of all, hi everyone. I was enjoying listening to you, Lauren, but happy to jump in as well. So as Lauren already mentioned before, I work on demand gen with Stravito, B2B enterprise software companies. So all the challenges that come with that, like longer buying cycles and longer feedback loops. So you can say that I definitely love a challenge. And demand gen is always a challenge, I would say, in this environment. But very happy to share with you today more about our database augmentation project, which I believe that it's been one of our most successful tactics this year. And as I said, while there's still lots of things to figure out, definitely we are seeing a very positive ROI from this. And to go to the beginning, why we decided to do this as a bigger project, because you can argue that you'll always work with your database, but why I believe it is value to think of it in a more structured and technical way. I think there are a couple of reasons. So this idea of working with a database as a project started towards the end of last year, when we were finalizing our planning basically for 2023. And the question that we were trying to answer, which I'm sure many of you are in that situation, is how are we going to meet our pipeline targets in the following year? So while trying to stack up all the different initiatives we had planned across channels, we realized quite quickly that what is going to get us there, what is going to get us to the target, it's not necessarily, or maybe better said, not entirely, just doing more stuff, like more campaigns or more things that we were already doing, but also finding ways in the same time to increase our reach and engage more of our target group in activities that we are already doing. So basically, you can say that you can do more events, more webinars, more email campaigns, more podcast episodes, and whatever you are working with. But if you're not also increasing your audience at the same time, you will end up hitting a plateau in terms of the results that you can expect as direct contribution of those channels. And that's what I think got us to ask ourselves, how do we feel about our database? Do we think we have a big enough database? Do we feel we have a healthy database? How many more people are out there maybe that we are not capturing already? And I didn't have a straightforward answer to that at that point. And I think that was the trigger point. And I will say, if you don't have a very clear answer to those questions, I think that's your sign that, your database is an area to focus on. Of course, you can have different ways to do that, but there's definitely something that requires attention. Because if you don't do that, what tends to happen from my experience is that you will continue slowly building your database month over month through the different channels that you have, like, subscriptions to webinars or events that you attend, website downloads, advertising, BD and sales, people doing their own prospecting and constantly adding people to your CRM. But some of these will be very expensive channels in terms of cost per lead. For us, most probably, you will not capture all the relevant details that you need in order to make sure that your database stays relevant. So yeah, all in all, this made us believe that, trying to do this as a bigger project, like as a one-time project, of course, while ongoing maintenance is required, and we can talk more about it, it's not only going to be more cost effective, but will actually help us drive more ROI across all the different channels. Because the sooner you have someone in your database, the sooner you start tracking their engagements with you across channels. So this is not only about email marketing. I think something that I want to point out quite soon in the conversation, that it's not the only kind of channel to focus on in relation to the database. And the sooner you understand your ICP and the better you understand your ICP, I think the more ROI you can drive on all the other channels. Yeah. So I hope that gives a good maybe background into the different reasonings of why I see this as a more strategic approach than just the ongoing things that happen by default on a monthly basis.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Adriana. Let me sort of show a sort of summary of what you just said for everyone, is that, taking on this initiative starts from a place of figuring out how you're going to meet these ambitious pipeline goals for even next year. And then also knowing, and I'm curious about the people on this call, do you know your coverage of your ICP in your database? And if you don't, there's probably warranting doing a project to even just understand how many of your ICP are out there and what the representation of them is in your database right now. Alternatives, you can also look at this database project. There is a cost to it, of course, but the alternatives are also costly and the costs add up more over time. And this is really laying the foundation for not just email, but all of the things you're going to want to distribute to your audience over time. So thank you so much. That's a great way to set the stage. I'm also curious, what were your expectations of success for the project? So once you decided, okay, we have to do this to lay a foundation for ourselves, how did you know when it was going to be successful?
Yes, that's a great question. So as I said, first of all, what instigated this was the fact of not having a clear answer on, if we think that our database, do we have a good coverage with our database on our, total addressable market and ICP. So I think, definitely an expectation was to get an answer to that, like to be able to understand, okay, where we currently are in terms of our database compared to our total addressable market. And if we are identifying a gap, as I said, like initially, you might not even know if there is a gap, but kind of if there is a gap in there, then of course, how can we cover that gap? So I think in our case, we did identify that very, very quickly. And I think especially if you're in B2B, I think something that tends to happen is that we think of the total addressable market in terms of the number of companies or companies in general that we target. But I think you need to go a bit deeper and actually think of, how many people are out there that work in those companies that you identify as the type of people that you will approach. And I think you don't need any fancy methods or tools to do that. You can simply just do a LinkedIn Sales Navigator search on, on your ICP criteria and just see how many results you get. And then you simply compare that number with the number that you have in our database. So for us, like, just doing that simple exercise, I could clearly see that there is the potential to triple our database, because clearly I saw that gap between what we currently have and what I see out there, as people fitting our ICP. So that was maybe one of the success metrics. It's like, okay, can we cover that gap? Can we triple, in our case, our database, just because we knew that was a possibility? But besides the actual number, I think we always need to have a number when we talk about, like, how do we measure this? In our case, triple the database. I think it's also about how we are doing that and having processes around doing that. Because otherwise, I think, databases, from my experience, they tend very quickly to become super messy if you don't have processes around them. So how do you import the data? What type of information you need? And I think that applies even if you don't need to add more people to the database, even if the conclusion is that, yes, you are already capturing everyone who is relevant. It's like, okay, seeing if you capture all the relevant information that you need about them. So having processes and standardize how you work with the database was very important for us. And then just making sure that while we saw this as a more one-time effort, we still needed to make sure that we have ongoing processes in place for the team to be prepared to handle this going forward. Because again, going back to my previous point, otherwise databases can become very messy very quickly.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, so to sum up, it's not just about, first of all, it's about capturing more leads. It's about finding that total addressable market and getting as close as you can in your marketing database, but it's also about setting the foundation so the data is organized, it's standardized, and that there is understanding within your team of how to keep it that way going forward and how growth is going to happen going forward. So let's address one other thing right off the bat that has already come up in the chat, which is GDPR. I know some of you are joining from Europe today, and this is a really top of mind consideration for you. So before we talk about this, I just want to, big disclaimer, we are not lawyers. But this is coming from understanding from lawyers on our team. But again, this is not legal advice. This is just contextual to this project. But Adriana, why don't you tell us a little bit about how we thought about GDPR in relation to this project?
Yes. So I saw that you already had some of the things on the slide.
Sorry,
so
yes.
Can you go to that?
We'll get there.
No, it's good. So I mean, in our case, again, like, being a disclaimer, B2B kind of company, so we are selling with the other companies. I think, once we internally check that with our own, security persons and people involved, we do consider that, like, as a B2B, you usually have the legitimate interest to reach out to people. As long as, and I think that's a big disclaimer and why it's important to do these database projects well, is to keep your audience as relevant as possible. So as long as you are very clear on who fits your ICP and the type of people that should be interested or like you are selling to, then I think, like you can use a legitimate interest clause under GDPR to capture that information. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that you don't have to make sure that you always have very easy ways for people to opt out of things. So I think that's the other, way that you always make sure that that's by default offered. And I think maybe we can enter into more details in this, but I think, you also have the other options of running opt-in, opt-out, double opt-in campaigns, which I can admit that personally I was very afraid of back in the days. Like, I actually remember like one of the conversations that I had with Blue Seedling about it when they suggested to do this. And I was like, that's my worst nightmare, so to say. But yeah, we will be sharing some tips with you later on. I don't think you should be afraid of them. I think as long as you give people a glimpse into what you are genuinely planning to share with them or how you are planning to engage with them, we've seen actually great success. And I was surprised by the positive responses that we got by running opt-in, opt-out type of campaigns. So that's just something that, yeah, from my experience, I would say to, don't be afraid of them. But of course, you need to have some thinking around how we are gonna run them.
Great. Yes. Thank you, Adriana. Those are great points. And just to sort of sum up here again, disclaimer, we're not lawyers. If we were doing something like this, you would please work with your own lawyers. But in this case, we approached it from the context of really making sure we were only sharing very relevant information and that there was a legitimate interest in the audience that we were talking to. And then, being very considerative of doing opt-out, single opt-out, opt-in, or double opt-in as you're reaching out to new folks. All right, now that we've covered the basics, let's get into the playbooks. And so I'm going to pass the mic to Tim Jung from our team, who was really the mastermind behind the database augmentation project, along with the team at Storito. So Tim, how's it going?
Hey, Lauren. Hello, everyone. Yep, so this is going into the playbooks here. We called this section Building the Engine, Taking Your Marketing Database to the Next Level. And this is our playbook, as Lauren said beforehand, in growing the database, but also priming it, standardizing and setting yourself up for success now and then down the road as well. So just a quick meme before we get things started. Breaking news: if it's not in the CRM, it doesn't exist. And I'm sure as marketers, this is something that we can all sympathize with one way or another. Yeah. So overall, we broke this database augmentation project down into a 4-step process, first of which was to understand and identify the gaps in the database. And what this really means is figuring out where your database is falling short. And this could be some insights into your marketing campaigns that you can't create a report for, or a campaign that you want to run but can't segment properly. And here we could see a couple of the steps that, while this step depends per organization, here are a couple that we find mandatory regardless of the market that you're targeting. And the first one is to interview anyone who handles the data, asking where it falls short both now and looking forward. And the second is to investigate the trends in the data and their sources. So every database is different, so the process here will vary for you, but these are the two that we find the most necessary regardless of your marketing database. Step 2 here is to align and research on the final solution package. So this, again, varies, but some things to watch out for are new workflows and platforms. And I believe this slide isn't refreshed, Lauren.
Sorry.
But yeah, so for example, something to be cognizant of: you have a lot of stakeholders that handle the database, and you need to make sure that everything is aligned and that everyone is familiar and approves of the new work forms and platforms that you're looking to onboard. Also, you want to make sure that the changes you implement actually solve the problem. So one thing that we really push for is to align each goal and each platform with the associated goal or the what you're looking to accomplish with this project, and making sure that every problem that was surfaced is being addressed. Yeah. And so going into step 3, it's the actual augmentation part, the not so fun part, if I'm being honest here, but a few examples here. And if you use HubSpot, this might be painfully familiar to you all, but there are examples of a few workflows that we implemented over here. So mapping things like contacts to the company level and so on and so forth. And then also you can see the actual lead injection. And while Storito was growing month over month, this was a one-time injection of a large number of leads here. And that's what we're really looking for when we dedicate a lot of time and effort into priming the database, is actually having it set up so that you can handle a large lead injection without breaking things here and there.
Great.
And then lastly, step 4 is the handoff reporting and training. So of course, this makes sense if you bring in a third party like us, but also if you do some version of this in-house, this is also really important, as you need to align again with all the different stakeholders here. And so a couple of things that you can do is, and what we recommend, is to actually create a dashboard dedicated to your database health. So we create a bunch of these marketing dashboards. We create a bunch of these dashboards for our marketing campaigns and to get some marketing insights. However, having an actual dashboard to monitor your database health will help you catch problems early on that come from when you onboard new data sources, or if you onboard someone new on the sales team and they don't know the proper procedure for actually inputting the data, you can avoid such a large scale project like this one here early on, and then troubleshoot the solution early on there. Of course, some additional things that we like to do is provide some video material, both hands-on and off training as well, just so that easily shared across your organization. So just to quickly sum up the results of the project again, so we 2x the database, 3x the actual marketing database, so meaning the coverage of the core ICP. We also created permanent and scalable processes for database augmentation and upkeep. And then the last one, granular and automated segmentation with standardized fields.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim. And just to drive home that point back on step 2, researching the final, packages you're talking about, we're really talking about, vendors there, right? And which vendor someone's going to choose is going to depend on a lot of different factors within their organization. Is that right?
Yep, exactly. Goes on to the vendors when it comes to expanding your database, but also maybe some vendors to help standardize your data to make sure that you align your platform with whatever platform that they might be using, so on and so forth. So lots of considerations here and there, but vendors to continue growing the database is definitely a large consideration there.
Absolutely. And there's sort of like, there's a mix of things in terms of vendors who will do it with automated tools versus manual tools. We won't go into a huge amount of detail here because it will really depend on the circumstances. So we can follow up with some additional resources for everyone on the call today. But just so you know that there is like a lengthy process in matching your needs and the internal gaps to solutions offered. And you really want to think through what that package is in its entirety before engaging there. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tim. All right. So once the database was augmented, what did we do? Oh, sorry, I forgot one thing, Adriana. We want your feedback here before we move on to the next section. Tell us your tips for doing a project like this. So obviously you partnered with Blue Seedling, but from your perspective at Stravito, what were things that we did along the way in our collaboration that set ourselves up for success?
Yes, I think it's hearing Tim describe some of the process definitely brings back a lot of memories, because we tried to do this over a short period of time, so it was quite intense, but we reached the results that we wanted. In terms of maybe tips for the road, as you had maybe on the slide, or like things to make sure that you set this up for success. Besides making sure that you do define what success looks like, and I think being as specific as possible here. It's not just about how we want to increase our database, as I mentioned earlier, but what exactly we are looking for more specifically. I think that's quite important. Something else that we faced along the way, and I think it's summarized well in your points there around the budget. I think especially when it comes to marketing and marketing budgets, like we think so much around channels and channels distribution. So you might have a budget dedicated to events, or you might have a budget dedicated to content, website, like different channels that you work with. And this was the first time, as I was saying, that I was thinking of the database as a standalone project and initiative that might not very easily fall under your typical channel distribution, because as I was mentioning before, I think this is something that you do to support your ROI across the channels. So I think being able to articulate that and kind of to showcase the contribution that an effort like this can have across channels, I think that should make it quite easy to prove the ROI, but just something to be mindful of in case you don't have a budget bucket in there without a name from where we can just tap, then most probably you will have to think about, okay, how can I frame this into my budget and get approval for this in order to be able to not stall things. Because as I said, the sooner that you move ahead with this, the sooner you can start seeing the benefits from it. And I think that ties maybe into the budget and kind of proving the ROI as well. The second point as well is making very clear in the organization, how does this impact more than just the marketing team? Like, it's not just about someone in marketing having a big database that they report on or send emails, but this has a bigger impact because, ideally your entire commercial organization works in one way or another with a database. From your, business development team, is that the setup that you have, or the sales team, or all the people that have to both better understand who you are targeting and selling to, but also have some of those direct touch points themselves. So making it quite clear that this is, something more than just that you do, not just for marketing. And then just making sure that, of course, you communicate those things internally, and also having internal milestones. I think it's quite important, because you'll not end up having that big result all of a sudden. It's like that will take time, even if after you augment the database, you still have to roll out different things that we will be talking about. So making sure that what success looks like in the meanwhile, I think it's quite important as well. And maybe the last thing that I will mention that it's not maybe clearly stated here is that, again, this is not just about getting email information and more email contacts in your database. So I think it's super important. And I remember, I think Tim was really good at doing this during the project, is understanding how you work, like how your commercial processes work, in order to understand what type of information do you need to capture. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise you can do this big project and all of a sudden triple your database. But if all you did was add email information and I know phone numbers, let's say, it might still not give you the ROI that you are looking for. So that's why it's important to understand, okay, how do we work? How do we do campaigns? In our case, I know region is quite important because we work across Europe and North America with different campaigns and events happening across the two different regions. So, you realize that it's very important for me to be able to filter my database based on region and city, country, whatever it is. Or again, job title and seniority is super important, again, in my case. So kind of identifying these things early on before you start putting data in the database, it's quite important, because otherwise you might end up doing a super big project that will cost you money as well. But then you realize when you go to the day-to-day operations of sending an email campaign that you are not able to actually segment the data in the way that you want to.
Absolutely. That's such a great point, Adriana. And the theme with all of these tips here really is like internal communication, right? Internal, making sure everyone is on the same page. And your marketing database, it's not just for your marketing emails. It's really a sort of intelligence hub for your entire commercial organization. So how can you get everyone on the same page on what data you need and what it needs to look like and how it's going to be segmented over time? So those are really amazing tips. All right, well, thank you so much. Now we can move on to the next section, the next playbook, which we're calling Feeding the Machine, Crafting Killer Content Efficiently. And what we mean here is once you have grown your database, what do you do with it? How do you reach out to these people? They are cold leads, right? Even if you've gone through all the steps to ensure that they are relevant contacts for your business and the content you're going to be sending them is incredibly relevant and within regulation, how are you going to reach out to them? So what we did was with this particular project was create a warm-up sequence of emails. Many of you on the call might be familiar with that. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about exactly what that looked like and how we thought about it. And just for the record, this is not something we've only done with Stravito. This is one of Blue Seedling's playbooks that we have is really tried and true over time with different verticals, different types of startups and scale-ups. So here's some of our evergreen goals when we approach a project like this across our clients. First of all, when you're thinking about an email prospecting sequence, especially a warm-up sequence, you want to start from a place of creating real value for the people you're sending it to. So what are their pain points? What kind of information do they need above and beyond your sales pitch, above and beyond your exact product? What are they looking for that you can really address? And then once you've done that, how do you introduce your project in a way that is in the context of their pain points, in the context of their challenges and things that they are very hungry to know and learn? And then finally, in these warm-up sequences, you're ultimately going to try to drive people towards product demos as an initial step, but then you also want to prime them to be part of your database for the long term. So really explaining the value that they're going to get out of being in your database. What kind of thought leadership are they going to get? What kind of exposure to interesting industry content, et cetera, et cetera. So these are kind of our 3 evergreen goals. So what does that look like once you start to build out a sequence of emails? So this is just a sample cadence that we would use for email prospecting. It's a series of 5 emails. And some things I want to point out here. Again, I don't want to repeat what I just said. Obviously, we would reach out and talk about pain points, but we really start off these sequences by sharing industry news. And it doesn't just have to be your own content. It can be content from that you're already reading as someone who is in your industry, in your vertical, and you want to share what you think is going on in the industry, share your outlook on things. You don't have to be afraid that you're not driving people to a product demo right away. What you really want to do is speak to your audience on their own terms. You want to speak to them in their language and really show that you are part of the same team within their industry. So just to continue to go through this cadence a bit, once you do that, you can sort of move on to your understanding of their pain points, get a little more specific by providing some stats around ROI for your product. As we all know on this call today, marketers are very concerned with ROI. So is every other type of function within companies these days, just because of market conditions. Sharing client reviews and testimonials can be very powerful. And capping things off with a product demo sign-up email. Once you have established all of these other pieces of meaningful content, relevant content, valuable content, that tends to work very well. So I also wanted to show you an example of what an industry news email can look like. This is just an example. This is not from Stravito, but I want to drive home a couple of points here. So really making most of the email just relevant industry content. It's not about you. It's not sales. People can smell a sales email from a million miles away. So share something about, about your insights into the industry. Here, this is an industry reading list, as we like to call it, or a reader type email. And so at the beginning, you're really starting out with external links, external thought leadership, and then you're moving towards your own content. So it's going from, Furniture Today, Modern Retail, that are industry publications, moving into your own content, and then finally funneling down even further into a product demo. So this is obviously this is a very general template, but we've really seen something like this work very well across many, many different types of organizations. So once I want to go back to Stravito, what are some of the things that we shared with the Stravito audience? Stravito already had a wonderful content machine going. I want to emphasize that. So that is something that they really had going for them. These are just a couple of pieces of Stravito content that were already up and running. The first two, Stravito's CEO had a podcast, the Consumer Insights podcast, where he interviews both clients, but also industry people from the world of market research and insights. And then also that podcast content had been, transformed and repackaged into these beautiful State of Insights report by Stravito's internal content team. And then finally on the right is just another example of external content that we would share with Stravito's audience that is relevant to them. Adriana, from your perspective, what were some, why don't you walk us through some tips as we were working together very closely on the content we were going to share with this audience? What was most important to you?
As you emphasized as well, I think, if you have any content efforts, already happening, I think, that's always a good, starting point of like seeing how can you better, distribute and communicate the things that you are already doing that are, coming from an effort to actually be relevant to your target audience. So yeah, anything that, it's already out there, I think it can very easily be packaged for this channel as well, like the email marketing in particular. But at the same time, and I think you mentioned really well, Lauren, and I think definitely that's something that we started doing more once we started collaborating, is to not be afraid to also share external content. So while it's great if you produce your own content, of course, it also takes time to build that engine and takes effort. And while I always encourage you to make sure that you build towards that, in the meanwhile, that should not be a blocker. So you should not think, and I was in that situation myself, many times thinking like, oh, I don't have things to promote, I don't have things to share, I don't have new content, out, and I don't think that's how you should think about it. Like I think as long as you think about, what is relevant to your audience and what they are interested in, then your own content production should not necessarily be the blocker there. So once you change that approach, I think all of a sudden, both you will start, finding more things that are relevant to share with your audience. But it will also, I will say, motivate your own content engine to keep producing, because you start seeing all these great results from people interacting and engaging with your content. And it has that, both way effects, where the more you focus on email as well, like by default, I will say you will start focusing on content as well. So I think those are just some things to mention. Another thing maybe not mentioned exactly here on the slide is the format of the emails. And I think here is something that you'll have to keep experimenting it. But in our case, like the format and playbook that Lauren shared with you before, like it was a similar playbook that we applied and worked really well for us. And I was coming from transitioning from a more maybe typical HTML marketing style emails that I think they were working well when it comes to, I don't know, driving people to the website or to the content piece that you actually wanted to drive. But yeah, I'm not sure, and happy to hear any, like of your own experiences as well. Like, I'm not sure how often you'll get someone to reply to a very kind of typical marketing email that looks like a marketing email. So initially started slowly by just A/B testing between the two different approaches, like the more, nice looking marketing emails that usually as marketing people we really like to spend time on to make them pretty. And the more, plain text emails looking like normal emails. And very quickly we start seeing, much more, like higher traction. And by higher traction, I mean people actually replying to those type of emails. And for me, at least personally, and for the team, it became much more important to get that qualitative feedback when it comes to replies than looking at open rates and click-through rates and all these other, more high level metrics out there. Again, as I said, it might not apply to everyone, but I think we should not be afraid to experiment between kind of the different approaches and then go with the one that actually drives results. Even if personally you might think like, but this they don't look so nice, or like personally you would prefer to work on another type of email. It's all about like, where does the audience, which type of email works for your audience, basically.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Adriana. In fact, we'll follow up with everyone here with some, I wrote a blog post about my love for plain text emails, and so of other people on our team. And so we can share some more resources about our thinking there. And one last point to emphasize here is the fact that you shouldn't necessarily think about content generation as this big task that you have to undertake. Really, even if you're a small team, we work with a lot of, very, very small startup teams as well that are just a couple of founders. And really the way that you can think about content at that stage is that it's something that you're already doing. You as a founding team are already doing industry research. You should already know your ICP really well as through your process of engaging with them at the very beginning of your company. So thinking about content generation just from a perspective of what can you share about your industry that that from the work that you are already doing. And we can also share resources from other startups that we've worked with that have had, just a 2-person team, and they were able to get a very similar initiative to this off the ground. So
that's a great point, Lauren. I will just add maybe something on top of what you exactly said, that I think where in our case where we started to see the results, coming in, was when we had this shift in mentality from, it's hard to do email. I don't want to do email. Like, it's going to be hard to cut through. It's like, so hard to get people's attention. We don't have things to promote, or like we don't have enough content, to actually not seeing it as a hard thing anymore. Because I think like, if you see it as a hard thing, that most probably, you don't have the right mindset around it. And as Lauren was saying, like, I agree, like it doesn't have to be hard regardless of the size of the team or your content production in general, but just thinking more genuinely what you want to share with your prospects. And I think when that shift happened, like, across the team, I think that's also when things started to flow in more naturally and started to get, more results and more positive feedback from people.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point, Adriana. That's a definitely necessary mindset shift. let's look at the results from this. Let's sort of sum up. We showed this at the beginning, but after this, prospecting sequence, we really felt strongly that there were great short-term results and great long-term results. So obviously there was a 3x growth in Stravito's database from this email sequence, that a version of it for Stravito that we shared. There were 10 demo requests in a single week. And for context, that was sort of the best week ever for email marketing at Stravito. I know different people have, depending on the size of your database, et cetera, that number may look big or it may look small, but for this audience, it was really quite a feat. And then really one of the best long-term effects we've seen so far after this project is that we've really created a different, email marketing now has a direct contribution to the sales pipeline every month. And this is a sustainable thing that's happened even after the initial prospecting sequence. We now have a regular cadence of marketing emails that is dependable, that is sort of based on the same philosophies of sharing relevant content, making sure that that there's not a huge sales bend, that it's really focused on ICP pain points and what sort of knowledge they want. And in fact, before we move on to talking about what's happened next, let's talk a little bit about this qualitative feedback that Adriana mentioned. These are just a couple of the emails that Adriana has received in relation to the email prospecting sequence. I love this one up in the top left, someone who said, "Good marketing, should we talk for 30 minutes? That shows you that also your audience is capable of holding multiple things in their brain at once. They can read a newsletter from you and understand enjoy the content, enjoy the industry news, but also realize that it's marketing and want to engage with your product." There's a direct line there for a lot of people. Here's another one that I believe we received this just last week, Adriana, the one at the bottom. They've been reading and enjoying the newsletters, and they also have learned more about Stravito's platform and want to schedule a demo. Even I believe this was in response to not a demo request email. This was just a industry news email, but we had contacted them in a consistent, valuable manner over time, that we'd sort of earned their goodwill, and then they felt that they could reach out and take it on themselves to request a demo email. Adriana, anything else to add to these qualitative results?
I mean, as I was mentioning, this type of qualitative results end up now being even more important to me than the actual optimizing for replies, basically, than just open rates and a lot of these things that are hard to measure anyway nowadays with the different systems and softwares and policies in place. So kind of getting direct feedback from people, I think it's super relevant. What we mentioned, that was my learning as well, is that you don't have to push for salesy email or direct call to actions like, do you want to talk, schedule a meeting, request a demo. I think all of the examples that we chose actually came from the more industry news type of format. So just very relevant content where the call to action, it's not anywhere near, do you want to talk to us? It's just around the content that we are sharing. So that was my other learning. It's like just understanding that at all points in time, a certain percentage of your database is going to be looking for a solution. And I think just being on the radar with the great content that you have, or the relevant content that you want to promote, that's going to be that's going to be what is going to take to cut through all the noise, not necessarily the very salesy content or like emails. And at the same time, of course, the rest of your database, you'll just have to nurture and engage. So the same type of content is great for that as well, because that's the whole idea of like keeping the content relevant and more top funnel, and not pushing for a salesy approach. So I think that's that's something that we've been learning along the way as well, that the results will not just come from very specific lead gen type of content and call to actions, but they can very well come as well from this approach where you just try to share relevant content with your audience. But the key here is to be consistent. So as long as you are consistent, as you see some of these codes, like usually it will not happen after one email. And here also, I think it's wrong to measure performance per email as well, because as you see here, a lot of these people come after they have engaged with several emails. So that's also something that, happy to discuss more about it, but it's like, how do you measure the performance of this channel? Because it's more of a journey than an individual kind of, touch point. So yeah, those are just some things maybe at top of mind, but happy to get more maybe specific questions on the topic.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Adriana. Yeah, so before we're just about ready for Q&A, but really quickly, I just want to run through some of the exciting things that have happened since this initial project and show you some examples from other clients. So once you do this initial augmentation project, email prospecting, what do you do next? At Servito, we realized, well, we have this great community now, and we decided to brand the community. And by the community, we mean our regular dependable cadence of emails that we're sending to this marketing database. So we have an industry newsletter, we have events that sort of coincide with different industry conferences. We have the podcast that was already happening. And so what we did to form this community is we just sort of branded all of them under the banner of the Insiders Club. And it's an in-flight initiative and relatively new, but we're really excited about where this is going. To give you an example from a totally different space, from a cybersecurity client of ours, this is from Zero Networks, a cybersecurity company, and they sort of rallied their community around a new holiday that they invented called Microsegmentation Day. I won't go into too much detail here, but just another idea of once you have warmed up these leads, how do you continue to bring them together around relevant industry news? And they also formed a really interesting magazine that was a really hot item at conferences they attended, with interviews with industry leaders. So again, this is not super salesy content. This is just relevant to their audience. And it's really set them up for success going forward. All right, so without further ado, thank you for listening to this story, and we would be happy to take any and all questions. Feel free to use the Q&A box or the chat. We'll give you one more moment, and just to reiterate, we'll be following up later today with a quick survey about today's session and some additional resources like the ones that we mentioned. And so look out for that. All right, one question that we have here is, I'm curious about how you would approach this project for companies with too large of a total addressable market to capture everyone immediately. See, Tim, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so it does, again, hate to sound like a broken record, but it does depend, again, on your organization, even if you have the same problem of too large of a total addressable market to capture everyone, but work with the budget that you have. It's still nice to it's still important to get the insight of what is your total addressable market, whether you include them into the database or not, knowing where the gaps is and having an initial number set early on, and then also thinking about a scalable process in which to do this down the road when you do have the budget to maybe look for more contacts, or you have to check in, do like your monthly or quarterly check-in, and find and start adjusting your database and how it looks based on a lot of the go-to-market strategies that you're implementing. So again, depends on each organization, but ultimately do what you can up front, and then just make sure you have a scalable process down the road in order to eventually get to that final goal of capturing your total addressable market.
Absolutely. And doing some of the internal work that we talked about of, getting everyone internally on the same page about what the priorities are, and doing that initial exercise can help you set yourself up for success, even if this has to be a long-term phase project. All right, we're almost out of time. So I just want to, Adriana, thank you so much again for joining us today. This is a really interesting, valuable story that hopefully is speaking of relevant content. I hope this was relevant to our audience and can provide some inspiration going forward. We'll be reaching out, and for any additional questions, we are happy to offer one of our Blue Seedling office hours sessions that's available to everyone on the call today. And yes, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon, and be well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.